The White House says visitor logs do not exist for President Biden's Delaware beach house, where classified information was discovered. Quote, like every president in decades of modern history, his personal residence is personal.
But House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer says he isn't buying the White House's latest excuse.
We wonder if the Secret Service had records now. That's our next question, because he still had Secret Service protection. And you would assume that the Secret Service would vet people that would be allowed on the premise of the dwelling for the President of the United States.
Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee joins us now. Governor, good morning to you. So Jonathan Turley says that Congress, of course, has the right to know who had access to these classified documents. And if these records, if these logs of who visited President Biden in Wilmington don't exist, they could actually have interviews with staff, family members, past visitors, which could escalate the situation very much so if you have some members of the first family sitting down for interviews under oath. Do you think something like that could have unfold?
Well, we certainly need to know who was showing up at the residence. If these documents were being kept in a garage by his Corvette, were they, exposed? Could somebody just walk in there and take one of those files? We don't know. And we don't know who was there. And I totally think that Congressman Comer is right. The Secret Service carefully knows who's going to be around someone who is one of their protectees. They know everything they can about them. You have to give a Social Security number to the Secret Service before you can see a protectee. They certainly keep notes, and those notes wouldn't just disappear. I think the biggest question of all is how come that it was Joe Biden's own attorneys, both White House attorneys and his personal attorneys, who were able to go looking through his records. And when Donald Trump's records were searched, his attorneys were not allowed in the room or anywhere on site. And I just find that very troubling. I think it's very indicative of the fact that we have a double standard of justice. We all know it, but we just keep getting more and more pieces of evidence to substantiate that.
The double standard is one aspect of the attorneys going in. There's also another aspect that Turley highlights, and it's the fact that if these attorneys did the job of the movers, they themselves could be called as witnesses. That means this whole plan to send the attorneys in could wildly backfire against Joe Biden. Turley also adding this: the most serious discovery would be evidence that Biden worked off their documents or removed them from their classification folders. If these documents were used or knowingly possessed over 6 years, it would qualify as an intentional act to unlawfully possess the material. That last part, intentional act. Do you think, on the whole, this entire episode warrants criminal charges against Joe Biden?
We don't know. I mean, Todd, I'd love to say, yeah, we know exactly what this all means. We don't know. But here's what we know. We know that 27 heavily armed FBI agents raided Donald Trump's home, his personal space, including his wife's clothes closet, because they thought that this was such a national security risk, even though it was under lock and key, and there were ongoing negotiations to get whatever material needed to go to the archives. In Joe's case, he had no right to take it. He was vice president, not president. He couldn't declassify anything. And he had it for 6 years. And now we're just finding out. And truth is, we now know that these documents were discovered and disclosed only internally just before the election. But we didn't know about it until well into the new year. How come? Who kept it secret? Who was protecting him? Who continues to protect him? And why is the documents in his vice presidential hands so much less important than the documents that were in a sitting or a former president's hands in his own residence in a locked place?
Yeah, we're also hearing a story from Arizona Republic editor. His name's Greg Burton. He's recalling a personal experience where he saw classified documents on the desk of then Vice President Biden back in 2010. And apparently the Secret Service asked his cameraman to delete some photos, some images of his time interviewing the vice president, just in case those documents were in those pictures. Just really quickly to you, how important do you think that story is, dating back to 2010?
Well, it's pretty important. Interestingly, one of the figures in that story was Jay Carney, who ended up being Obama's press secretary, but at the time was working for Joe Biden. And he was the one that confronted the reporter and the cameraman. And there was kind of a little dust up there to make sure that they got that material. Why? Why was it so important? And if it's so important, how come that we're just now seeing that there are still documents laying around in somebody's garage? I've got a garage, like probably you do. It's messy.
It's messy.
I don't think, you would want to leave something of great importance just sitting around.
We got to leave it there. Thank you, sir, as always.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.